two major things: clean water, clean drinking water, and adequate food are responsible for about 70% of the life gain in terms of life expectancy from 100 years ago, when people were living 45 years or whatever. 70% of that is those two things: clean water and adequate good nutrition. About 20% come from the antibiotic revolution, and the remaining 10% was all the other drugs and surgery and procedures combined.
Yeah, but you didn't factor in all the people dying from medicine too. You got to subtract all.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the thing, is that medicine has co-opted the gains in human health that actually came from public health, and people don't realize that they were public health measures as opposed to medical measures. I mean, even, as controversial as a topic as it is, vaccines, that's public health. That's not medicine. Just because a doctor gives the injection, that's not something that you go to the doctor and the doctor says, oh, I think given your condition that you're 3 years old and you're about to go to school, you should receive this medication. No, those are public health mandates. And
right.
And so the one thing that was left, that you left out, that figures in there somewhere, Jay, is public health regulations regarding housing and the number of people that could live in a single unit, and how many families can live in an apartment that has just one bathroom or whatever, all those sorts of things. That also stemmed a lot of communicable disease and other issues. One thing, if I can just throw it in there, is that I also think that medicine takes credit from public health, because it took me a long time to understand where that line really should be drawn. But I would say, I don't think I've read it anywhere, but I would say that clinical trials are public health. It doesn't become medicine until doctors start to employ, say, a new drug or a new protocol, until they start to implement that in the clinic and it becomes clinical practice. Then that is medicine. But
right.
the construct of requiring clinical trials or choosing to use clinical trials as a way of justifying making shifts in medical care, that's public health. And the very fact that you use statistical analysis on large populations, that's the antithesis of individual treatment. And so it's a funny thing, because I don't know if it's like the snake eating its tail or what metaphor, but individualized, personalized care in medicine. I have a graphic that I created because I'm a big proponent of using big data to focus on individual issues. And my magical, erudite phrase is e pluribus unum. And to take the insights gathered from huge pieces of data and from maybe even huge populations, and then seeing how can you apply that to an individual, but treating that individual as an individual and not as belonging to some particular part of the bell-shaped curve that we have no way of knowing whether they belong to, because, the clinical trial was run in Croatia and my patient is Haitian and living, in Iowa. And so it's like, does that study really apply to that person? So that transition from a public health inside of a clinical trial and to translate that into a clinical N of one decision, to me, that's something that's done rather imprecisely.
Yeah, that's that's the field of translational medicine or whatever.
Yeah.
And, I was just going to tell you, in my training in the medical geography, I studied, there's a book, Clinical Epidemiology by Noel Weiss, who was here, and my mentor, who was both a professor of public health and geography, Jonathan Mayer, he was like, he was very, like, the entire book was all like design of trials, like, because it's under clinical epidemiology is like both case control studies, retrospective, prospective, all like the randomized trials, controlled trials, all these various different types of trials and designs are coming from the field of epidemiology and public health to assess risk benefits, in certain whatever settings you have. So definitely public health is really important to medicine for the goals that we want, and they need to go hand in hand much better. And I've always wanted to think of myself as a public health doctor too, that, we're acting, as you say, from the many, which is like the data, the understanding of what's going on, and what the needs are from a public health standpoint, and understandings are, I guess, and then translating that into, well, how does that apply to my particular patient who has some of these features but not these other ones? So how do you kind of, that's the practice of medicine. That's
Right.
part of the art and science of it, is knowing how to make those movements on scale. So anyway,
Yeah,
I just want. Yeah.
I was just going to add one little addendum. I think if you look at the history of medical experimentation, like I was saying, that clinical trials are more of a public health vehicle, because if you look at what doctors typically, let's say in the early 1900s, did when they wanted to experiment with a new therapy, they would just try it out on some people. Immigrants, they would give
Prisoners.
syphilis to a bunch of guys. Yeah, but with no control group, no informed consent. I mean, any of those other things, all those other things that constitute clinical trials now are public health or ethics, medical ethics mandates. They didn't come from the doctors that were curious. It's like, yeah, I wonder whether or not, chamomile can help, babies stop crying at night. They would just give it to a bunch of moms and tell them, yeah, just give it to your kid, and then tell me how it went. That's not a clinical trial.
It's observational understanding. Sometimes you can do, if you do it in a try to do something systematic about it. But I do think ketamine, which I use a lot in my practice, I recently prepared a talk and found the first trial that was done in humans with ketamine was done in prisoners, and by the company, by Park Davis. Edward Domino, I think, was the principal investigator. And I don't know what prisoners they used, and if they knew, hey, you're getting this new PCP alternative, like, are you cool with that? I mean, it might change your awareness of like why you're in prison, or you want you want more time in the gym. Well, maybe you should do this trial. Like there was probably all kinds of terrible and perverse
incentives.
Yeah. I mean, I would have done it too. But anyway, that's just an interesting aside in terms relevant to what you're saying.